Hello and welcome to Mental Matters on Open Studio. My name is Frank Malaba, and today we are talking about borderline personality disorder as well as schizophrenia. I have today with me Clement and I have Carrie, and we're going to tackle this issue because from what I understand, they are two totally different, unrelated issues. I wanted to start with you, Carrie. Please walk me through what borderline personality disorder is.
Sure. So when I was diagnosed with borderline, I wanted to know what it was, and so I read up a lot about it. And what was very interesting is it was initially actually diagnosed back in the 1930s. And it was called borderline because they said that people were between neurosis and psychosis. So between those two kind of things. Later in the 1980s, it actually became a personality disorder, and people realized that it was actually had nothing much to do. Neurosis is not used that much anymore in mental issues, but people very often confuse it with schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. Is the other one. People get them quite confused, and it's borderline personality is nothing like either of those. Borderline personality is far more along the lines of an interpersonal relational kind of disorder, where you struggle with interpersonal relationships, and you struggle with very kind of overwhelming feelings. It's like wearing your skin on inside out.
Okay.
For your whole life. Yeah.
Wow. We're going to come back to that and tackle that a bit more. Clement, schizophrenia, what is it? Because the only relationship I have with that word is if I'm watching a movie and a character is going through it and it's depicted in various ways.
Yes.
In your experience, what is schizophrenia? Can you walk me through what it is?
Okay. So schizophrenia is when you experience visions. One of the symptoms is visions, where you see things, or most of the time people just hear voices that is not there.
Okay.
So other people will not notice it, but only you notice it.
Okay.
And another symptom would be they're delusional, so they might be paranoid of someone following them or doing something, but it's not really happening.
So, is there a certain time it happens? Is there a trigger that brings it on, or can it happen at any time?
Well, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. So you will go through episodes. So during the day you could have maybe one episode, and the rest of the day you could be fine.
Okay.
Yes.
And for you, your journey, what point did you find out that you had schizophrenia?
Well, I never knew that I had schizophrenia. I just went to the doctor on a regular basis, saying I'm not feeling well. And so he said, all these symptoms are showing that you need to see a psychologist. So from the psychologist said, no, it cleared me, but just in case, you see a psychiatrist. And then when I went to the psychiatrist, she diagnosed me with schizophrenia, but I have a specific kind of schizophrenia, which is kind of asocial. So I don't really see things or hear voices.
Okay.
I'm just superiorly asocial.
Okay. I'm going to need you to break that down a little bit more for me. What does that mean?
So I like to spend my time alone. I'm completely fine with not being around people. I can spend my time whole day alone. I can go a whole month without speaking to another person.
And still feel okay
Still
within
feel
yourself?
okay. Yes.
Okay. Again. So Carrie, borderline. At what point in your life did you feel that this is what's going on and it doesn't feel right being in my body at this point?
I think I never even kind of clicked. I was told about 10 years ago I was diagnosed with borderline, and only when I started researching the criteria for borderline, because that's how my mind works. I want to look at each thing, and pull it apart and understand it. And when I looked at the criteria in the in the DSM-5, which kind of helps psychiatrists make diagnoses. When I pulled that apart, I realized that this has been part of my life for a very long time. You know, there's a couple of things that really stand out for me that made sense after I'd been diagnosed. Things like this very high sense of real or imagined abandonment. You know, if somebody was 5 minutes late with picking me up, I would go into an absolute panic that I'd been left behind or things like that. This feeling that my emotions always seemed far more intense than other people's. And so it was things like that, with that, and the very real lack of identity, not knowing who I was, and this fear that people around me were going to find out that I was lying to them, even though I wasn't. But I thought, because I didn't know who I was kind of faking it until you make it, and my whole life was a fake it till you make it. And terrified constantly that people were going to find out that I couldn't do that as well as what they perceived me to be doing it. I wasn't that smart, or I wasn't that nice, or, you know, and even though none of it was true, that's part of the disorder, is that constantly kind of...
So it almost feels like an imposter syndrome kind of
Yes.
thing that you would be going through. Okay. Clement,
Yes.
briefly, just let me know, when you first found out about schizophrenia,
Yes.
what was the first thing that went through your mind at that point?
Well, it was denial, complete and utter denial. I was diagnosed when I was 21, but it took me about 3 to 4 years for me to actually go on medication. Because even people who have severe schizophrenia don't believe that the medication helps them.
Okay.
Because one of the side effects of medication is that it makes you drowsy.
Okay.
So you sleep a lot, and so you lose your life. So you have to take the medication in the morning and you sleep the whole day. And when you take it at night, you sleep the whole night again.
Okay.
So you lose out on life.
We're going to come back and speak a little bit more about it. So if you'd like to be part of this conversation or talk to us, send us emails. You can email us on mental matters. I'm just going to get to the email address now. mentalmatterscourage@gmail.com. And also you can reach out to us on Facebook. It's on your screens right now. Do you want to talk to somebody about it? There's a number that's on your screen now. We shall show it again later if you miss it now. But we'll see you right after this break. Welcome back, and today we are talking about borderline personality disorder as well as schizophrenia. In studio with me, I've got Carrie and I've got Clement. We tackled a little bit earlier, but Carrie, I'd like to hear from you what sort of medication goes with borderline personality disorder.
So, interestingly enough, there isn't really medication for borderline. In fact, for most personality disorders, you cannot take medication, and that's the big difference between a mood disorder and a personality disorder, is there is no medication. I don't have a chemical imbalance or any of that connected to the borderline. It's more that I struggle with understanding and knowing social kind of things. So I mean, I could take medication to help ease anxiety and things like that, but the biggest thing that I need is actually therapy. And the therapy that's assisted me the most and was developed specifically for borderline is a therapy called dialectical behavior therapy.
Can you take me through a little bit through that, maybe in a minute?
Sure. No, okay. So dialectical behavior therapy was developed to assist somebody who suffered from borderline themselves, a therapist who suffered from borderline. And it really focuses on emotional regulation. So remember I was talking about that feeling like my skin was inside out.
Yeah.
So it's learning to regulate those emotions so that they don't shoot up and down as much. Things like distress tolerance, so going into that panic of being abandoned or people are going to find me out. So learning how to actually manage that distress. It looks at distraction techniques. So when I'm completely overwhelmed, distracting myself until I've calmed down enough to be able to look at what the problem is. And then also self-soothing, which is kind of saying, if I'm going into panic or my moods are fluctuating or something's wrong, how can I soothe myself using my 5 senses? So going to a park and looking at the clouds, lighting a scented candle, watching a favorite movie, things like that. So it's learning all of these techniques to actually help you deal with the day-to-day difficulties of having the personality disorder.
You stepped into a little bit of what we're going to talk about later, because they sound to me like great hacks that you have. But later we're going to speak a little bit more about them. I'm interested in finding out, schizophrenia, what kind of stigmas have you had to deal with?
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't think media has been kind to issues of mental health.
Yes.
So
right.
schizophrenia is something that a lot of people don't understand. So I cannot imagine that, you know, they are kind when it comes to issues of stigma. Have you faced any?
So one of the things I'm trying to do is find employment, and so they they're very distant against taking people with psychosocial disability, especially schizophrenia, because they don't know how to handle us. What if I now have an episode? Will they be able to handle me, you know, in the episode? So it's not just that, but even in public. So say, for instance, I start talking to myself, and I say, hey, and I talk back, and I'm like having a conversation. People would separate themselves physically from me, you know, distance themselves from me, because I'm having an episode.
Yeah.
And
So in that state, when, say, as you say, talking to yourself, are you aware you're doing it, or
now
is
that's
it
the thing, you're having an episode.
Okay.
It's a type of psychosis, and so you're not aware of it. And during that time, you know, it can go for a few minutes, maybe even half an hour, and you have no idea what you are doing. You are not in control of yourself.
Okay, so if you were to find a place of employment, it would be a space where people are able to support you through it and be
Yes.
able to understand what it is. Are there organizations that are able to help you through that and be able to speak to employers, potential employers?
Okay, so I'm with Cape Mental Health, and one of the programs at Cape Mental Health is Fountain House. So they have an occupational therapist that will reasonably accommodate me. So if, for instance, I do have an episode, they would just tell the manager or whoever's in charge of me, as he's taking his medication, they check if his medication is with him, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so there is support.
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic. It's great to know that there is support for that. I think one of the most important things that we need to step into as employers, if you're an employer, is to be able to understand that there's room for all of us to be great in what we do, and because we battle issues of mental health doesn't mean that we need to be sidelined. We're productive, we're great at what we do, we also bring a lot to the workplace that some other people wouldn't be able to have the sensitivities to handle. And so if you're an employer and you're thinking of opening up your space to be more inclusive, I think one of the best ways is to start reading more and finding out how you can actually be more inclusive and be helpful and not be part of the problem. Carrie, what has your journey been in terms of stigma? What has been the struggle?
I think there's so much stigma against borderline personality disorder. It's such a misunderstood illness, and the movies that are out there and the books that are out there, unfortunately, a lot of it is true in the sense that borderline is very, very volatile. I'm going to, because I think that you are going to leave anyway, I'm going to do everything to push you away so that I don't get hurt. But in essence, the last thing I want is for you to leave. But there's such fear around that. And so the movies that you see, while the basis characteristics are very true, they obviously overplay them. And that's what people have in their head. So if I say that I'm borderline, one of the first things is people either they think of schizophrenia or they think of bipolar. And it's not either of those. In fact, it's very far away from either of those. But people don't understand the volatility. They struggle to be around it. And again, it's been very difficult. People don't understand where the panic comes from. They don't understand why I try and push them away so quickly. And that's very difficult to deal with, is because everybody will just go, oh, well, you're borderline. We don't want to work with a borderline. A borderline is very difficult to work with. A borderline is very difficult to do therapy with. We're not going to do therapy. Oh, I can't be your psychiatrist anymore. I don't deal with therapy. So,
Okay. So we'll come back and tackle that a little bit more. So my message continually is, let's try and be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We shall come back with some life hacks on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Mental Matters on Open Studio. We are talking about borderline personality disorder and schizophrenia. So this is an exciting part for me always, because I learn something new each time, and everybody brings something different to the table. So what I wanted to find out from you, Clement, is it a superpower or is it a life hack that you're going to give me?
A life hack.
Life hack. Perfect. Let's hear it.
Okay, as a schizophrenic person,
Yeah.
you have episodes, but you feel helpless during this episode. And so after you have the episode, you feel down and depressed, which can make that you are now even worse afterwards. But you should live between every time, the moment you have, live to the fullest. Because you never know when you might have another episode, and never blame yourself for having an episode.
So it's to do with living to the full and being present in your own life and just between episodes.
Love the day.
That's a great life hack to have. So when you're living to the full, what are you doing? What do you do? What do you do for fun?
Do for fun? Well, I'll go out. I visit fountain house. I'll socialize with people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Love it. Carrie, life hack or superpower?
life hack probably. Just the lessons that I've learned through the therapy, through the DBT therapy that we were speaking about earlier, I've really been able to apply to many of the other things that I struggle with. And these things have taught me things like radical acceptance, and I think this has been one of the biggest and hardest, is this idea or concept of radical acceptance. And it's sitting in that moment and saying, I am exactly where I am meant to be in this moment. Everything that I've done before has led up to this moment. And there's these radical acceptance statements. And because sometimes it can be really hard. It's with borderline, it's not just an episode, it is a continuous life sentence and lifestyle. But with good therapy, you can learn to manage it and not fall into those fears and mood instability and things like that. And radical acceptance is one of the techniques that I learned that was really helpful, because when it feels like you just want to give up and it's unfair, and to turn around and just have radical acceptance that it is what it is and there's nothing wrong with it being what it is.
So is it just radical acceptance on your part personally, or is it radical acceptance coming from other people as well?
Well, I have no control over other people at all.
Want to do, yeah.
So I only have control over what I do in my life. And so, it's radical acceptance from my side, and saying if people are going to have these stigmas or things like that, there's nothing I can do. There's acceptance of that. It's not easy to have radical acceptance, and I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but it is, I find it quite an amazing concept, and I can only imagine that life would actually be quite, not nicer, but life would be maybe easier if I consistently had radical acceptance of everything that was happening around me. But it is hard, but it's definitely a life hack for me.
It's quite a journey. So living to the full. So today I only got life hacks.
Yes.
So it's living to the full in between the episodes
Yes.
and doing what it is that gives you joy
As much joy
and
as
balance
possible. Yes.
and things, and also radical acceptance. And I love the way that you explained it. Well, my life hack as somebody that also has mental illness is running, exercise, writing. Music is a huge part for me. So my superpower, I'm going to add to the lucky packet of things that we have today. My superpower, I believe, is empathy and being able to cut through the peripherals
Yes.
of what people go through, because stepping into that space of being able to see the human element in the person despite what is going on around has been my superpower in different situations. I didn't know this until I came into this space in this show, and as I started learning and understanding what superpowers are, it's been an incredible journey, and meeting other people and hearing their superpowers. So I wanted to find out if either of you had something that you wanted to leave me with. And for people at home, I know one thing that you've given us today is the issue of employment and people
Yes.
finding employment. I think that's really important that people understand that people that are schizophrenic are actually employable and they are actually functional people.
Yes.
And I think that was something that you left me with. I don't know if you have something, Carrie, that you'd like to leave me with today.
Maybe just also in helping, in fighting against the stigma and helping other people understand is that not everything. I think what often happens is you walk down the street and you see somebody kicking the bin and you think, oh, that person's an angry person. But that person's going, I just got almost run over. This is reasonable to be angry. And so it's that judgment of what do I see in passing versus what is the circumstance of what that person's in. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to, before you judge or make snap decisions about whether somebody's difficult or unbearable or volatile, is to actually think, you know, what is their circumstance? What are they struggling with? What kind of mental disorder or personality disorder is happening in their life that they actually have no control over, and that they are fighting every day to warrior on in life, instead of just saying, oh, that person's volatile, but actually going, like asking them, like, what's up? Why did you seem so cross there? And I can say, no, I wasn't cross at all. I was just bored and I was kicking the bin because I was, you know, so don't make those snap decisions.
And that's important. And realizing that people exist in different forms and that they are on a journey. So if anything that we spoke about today resonated with you and you want to just get in touch base with us, you can email us on mentalmatterscourage@gmail.com. As well as find us on Facebook. Our Facebook information is on the screen right now, and you can contact us through that. You can find us, search us, and we are there. We're happy to interact and to give you content. If you've missed the other episodes, you can find them there. And the other thing is there is a number that's coming onto your screen now. If you know somebody or you yourself are going through some of the things that we've spoken about today, please call that number. You will also find it on the Facebook page. If in the future you want to go back and see some of the things and talk to somebody about them. For today, I'd like to say thank you very much, Clement. Thank you, Carrie. I'm going to actually shake your hands and say thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you in the studio with me. And that's it for today. Wonderful that you were able to join us today. We'll see you next time.